Title: The Price of Too Much Greed, the Man Who Ran Until He Lost Everything, Part 1. The content heart once. In a valley nestled between the Emerald Hills, lived a man named Elias. Elias was not a rich man, but he was a blessed one. He had a small cottage that smelled of cedar and lavender, a wife whose smile was his morning sun, and 2 children whose laughter echoed through the halls like music. Elias was a stonecutter. Every day, he worked hard, providing enough for his family. But as the years passed, a shadow began to grow in his heart. It wasn't the shadow of poverty, it was the shadow of comparison. He looked at the merchants in their silk robes. He looked at the governors in their golden carriages. And slowly, his cozy cottage began to feel like a cage. His simple meals began to taste like dust. The human lesson. Greed doesn't start with a crime. It starts with an "I want more." It begins when we stop counting our blessings and start counting what others have. One evening, while Elias was trekking deep into the forbidden peaks, he encountered an ancient hermit who was said to guard the treasures of the earth. The hermit, seeing the hunger in Elias's eyes, gave him a challenge. "Elias," the hermit whispered, "I will give you a chance to own all the land you can cover tomorrow, from the moment the sun touches the horizon until the moment it disappears. Every inch of ground you walk upon will be yours. If you return to this spot before the final ray of light vanishes, the land end, the gold beneath it is yours forever." But the hermit warned, if you are even 1 second late, you lose everything. Not just the land, but your life as well. Elias didn't hesitate. He didn't think of his family. He didn't think of the risk. He only saw the gold. As the first light of dawn broke, Elias took off. For the first 3 hours, he was joyful. He covered a lush meadow. "This will be for my mansion," he thought. He pushed further. He covered a forest of rare timber. "This will be for my wealth." By noon, the sun was a hammer, beating down on his head. His throat was parched. His legs were screaming, and his lungs felt like they were filled with hot coals. A locked back. The starting point was a tiny speck. He should have turned back then. But then, he saw a shimmering lake in the distance. "Just a little more," he whispered. "If I own that lake, I will be a king." The motivational truth. Greed is a horizon that keeps moving. No matter how much you gain, it whispers that the next thing is what will finally make you happy. It is a thirst that grows the more you drink. The sun began its descent. The sky turned a violent shade of red. Elias realized with a jolt of terror that he had gone too far. He turned and began to run back, but he wasn't the same man who had started that morning. His body was breaking. Every step was an agony. He threw away his water canteen. He tore off his heavy coat. He was stripped bare, running for his life. He could see the hermit standing on the hill. The sun was halfway behind the mountain. Elias's heart was hammering against his ribs so hard it felt like it would burst. He was coughing blood. His vision was blurring, but his mind was screaming. "More! Run! The gold! Wheat a final desperate leap." He threw himself across the finish line just as the last sliver of sun vanished. The hermit looked down at Elias, who lay face down in the dirt. "You did it, Elias," the hermit said quietly. "All this land, as far as you ran, belongs to you now." But Elias did not move. His heart had finally given out. The man who wanted 10,000 acres of land was now motionless, cold, and silent. In the end, his family came to fetch his body. They didn't need the meadows. They didn't need the lake. They dug a hole in the ground 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. That was all the land Elias truly needed. That was the only land he eventually kept. Have you ever wondered what makes someone endlessly chase more money, more power, more stuff, even when they already have more than enough? That's greed, and it's a fascinating and complex part of human psychology. It's not just about wanting things, it's about an insatiable desire for more. So where does this come from? Psychologists believe greed often stems from a deep-seated feeling of scarcity or insecurity. It might trace back to our evolutionary past, where hoarding resources was key to survival. In the modern world, this survival instinct can get twisted. We see ads, social media, and movies constantly telling us that having more will make us happier. This creates a comparison culture where we measure our own success against others, fueling a never-ending cycle of wanting what they have. Neurologically, greed is linked to the brain's reward system, specifically a neurotransmitter called dopamine. When we get something we want, we get a little hit of dopamine, which feels good. For some people, this system can go into overdrive. The thrill of acquiring something becomes more important than actually having it. It's like a roller coaster. Excitement is in the chase, not just reaching the destination. This can lead to a state of perpetual dissatisfaction, where no amount is ever truly enough. Interestingly, studies show that extremely greedy behavior is often linked to a lack of empathy. When the focus is entirely on personal gain, it becomes harder to consider the needs or feelings of others. This can damage relationships and, ironically, lead to social isolation, undermining the very happiness that the person was seeking in the first place. But here's the good news. We are not slaves to our impulses. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward finding a healthier balance. Practicing gratitude, appreciating what we already have, can be a powerful antidote to greed. Focusing on experiences rather than possessions, and building strong, meaningful relationships can bring a much more lasting and genuine sense of fulfillment. It's about shifting our focus from what can I get to what can I give and what can I appreciate right now. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. And if you found this interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. In a city famous for its luxury, there lived a weaver named Julian. While other weavers used cheap materials and sold them at high prices, Julian spent weeks on a single garment. He used the finest wool and poured his soul into every stitch. Was poor. His workshop was cold, and his shoes had holes in them. One day, the king's chief advisor visited his shop. He brought a chest of dull, low-quality silk. "Julian," the advisor whispered, "the king wants 1,000 banners for the royal jubilee. If you use this cheap silk, but tell the king it is the heavenly thread from Est, we will split the profit. You will be richer than any merchant in this city." Julian looked at his trembling, cold hands. He looked at the cheap silk. He knew that if he said yes, his poverty would end forever. Julian touched the cheap silk and shook his head. "My lord," he said softly, "if I weave a lie into these banners, I will have to live under the shadow of that lie every time I walk past the palace. My thread is honest. I cannot do it." The advisor was furious. "You fool! You will die in this cold room while others feast on the gold you rejected." For the next year, Julian was blacklisted. No one would buy from him, because the advisor had spread rumors that Julian was difficult. He became thinner. His fire went out, and he had to sell his furniture just to buy bread. The human lesson. The hardest time to say no to greed is when you have nothing. Integrity isn't tested when you are full. It is tested when you are starving. What Julian didn't know was that the king was dying, and he had no heir. He didn't want a king who was a warrior. He wanted a king who was incorruptible. The advisor had been sent to every craftsman in the city as a secret test. Every other weaver had accepted the deal. They had grown rich, built mansions, and laughed at Julian's stupidity. One morning, a royal carriage stopped at Julian's humble door. The king himself stepped out. He looked at Julian's bare room and his thin face. Then, he looked at a small, beautiful piece of white cloth. Julian was weaving just for himself, perfect, honest, and pure. The king spoke to the crowd that had gathered. "In this city, I found men who would sell their honor for a chest of gold. I found men who would weave lies into the fabric of our kingdom. But in this cold room, I found the only man who values the truth more than his own comfort." The king didn't just give Julian money. He appointed Julian as the guardian of the treasury. "I cannot trust the man who took the bribe," the king said, "but I can trust the man who chose to go hungry rather than be a thief." The greedy weavers who had taken the cheap silk deal were arrested for fraud and lost everything. Julian, however, was moved to the palace. He lived a life of luxury, but he never changed his heart. He used his wealth to build schools for weavers and ensured that no honest man in the city would ever have to go hungry again. Most people think that saying no to a shortcut is a loss. They see someone else getting rich through lies, and they feel like the nice guy finishes last. But listen closely. Greed gives you a house, but integrity gives you a home. Asterisk greed gives you a bed, but contentment gives you sleep. Greed gives you contacts, but integrity gives you friends. When you refuse to be greedy, you aren't missing out. You are protecting your soul. You are waiting for a reward that doesn't just fill your pockets, but fills your name with honor. The greatest reward of refusing greed is the person you become in the process. Your time is coming. Keep believing. Keep fighting. Don't just watch. Go out and prove them wrong. Thank you for being part of the journey. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.